Hey, my name's James Nicholson and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I want to talk about a real problem that a lot of tenants could end up with that maybe they're not expecting. You see, tenants have a bill going through that's going to protect them. It's called the Renters' Rights Bill. The Conservatives had a very similar bill that almost passed, and Labour have been really pushing their own version of the bill called the Renters' Rights Bill. And at the end of this summer, it's likely that it could be law. Now, there's a lot of stuff in there that landlords aren't pleased about, but there's also a lot of stuff in there that could massively impact tenants. And it could impact your credit score and the ability to get a future property. So in this video, I'm going to talk about all the bad things that could potentially be happening to tenants that could be actually worse for them than if they didn't have the Renters' Rights Bill before. So we're going to talk about all of that and more in this video. Now, if you're new and you haven't done already, do make sure you subscribe to the channel over here and hit that bell notification. We're on the way to 46,000 subscribers. And by subscribing, you'll get all the latest updates on this Renters' Rights Bill, on the property news, on house prices, interest rates, property investing, and much, much more. And let's get some views on this video so people are aware of exactly what's happening. Your part is simple. All you need to do is smash like, tickle like, do something to that like button. That helps with the YouTube algorithm, and that has really helped the channel grow. So thanks to everybody that takes a moment to do that. So the Renters' Rights Bill, a lot of it is potentially bad for landlords. You've got fines for landlords that are going up from potentially 5 grand as a minimum to 10 grand. They're going up from around 30 grand to 40 grand as the maximum. Those are worrying landlords. And one of the biggest things that landlords are worried about is something called Section 21. And Section 21 is what we call a no-fault eviction. So what does that even mean? Well, that means that for any reason, a landlord can serve 2 months' notice on a tenant in order to get their property back. Now, it's a formal process, but it's quite simple. And off the back of that, most tenants would just leave in that period of time. Now, some councils do say, don't fight it, and don't just leave because we don't have anywhere for you to stay. They tell you to stay there till the last minute, which I think is terrible advice. Imagine the stress if you've got children and you don't go and find somewhere else and you just wait till the day of eviction. That's not going to be very, very good at all. But most landlords would be able to serve that Section 21. The tenant would leave and that would be the end of it. Now, when the tenant gets to Section 21, nothing happens to their credit rating. It doesn't have any impact on their credit rating. And quite often, if you were a tenant that was in arrears, you damaged the property, your deposit wasn't going to cover all of that, you'd done lots of bad stuff to the property, most landlords would just say, you know what, it's not worth my time chasing this up through the courts, so I'm just going to walk away from there, I'm going to let them off, and I've got my property back, and I've learnt the lesson that I need to make sure I get a slightly better tenant moving forward. And that's just how it is, and that is good for the tenant because they don't get the CCJ, and it's kind of good for the landlord because they get the property back in a faster mechanism. Now, Renters' Rights Bill is saying we're going to abolish Section 21, which is the no-fault eviction. And so you can only get rid of tenants by something called a Section 8. Now, a Section 8 is a lot more formal. It goes through a court and it gets seen by a judge. I'm going to give you some reasons why you could get a Section 8. So it's a fault eviction, meaning something has gone wrong and it's a lot slower. That's why landlords don't like it. So here are the things that we're looking at in a Section 8. Firstly is significant rental arrears. Anything over 4 months is deemed as significant rental arrears. So that could be a reason you can get a Section 8. Other things would be like antisocial behaviour. Now that would need to be documented. So neighbours would have need to make noise complaints to the council, police reports would need to be filed. Those sorts of things would need to be used as evidence once it gets to court. If there's any criminal offences in there, so if you were using it as a house of ill repute, or you were growing drugs in there, which people do as well, those sorts of things are criminal offences. obviously that means you've broken your tenancy and you can be evicted. Any damage to the property, causing significant damage, smashing kitchens, breaking windows, these sorts of things are deemed as damage, and they can be a reason for a Section 8. A breach of a tenancy agreement, so subletting without permission, that's a breach of that as well. So that would be a breach of your tenancy. If you provided false information, so for example, you gave an incorrect name, that would be a breach of the tenancy. That could get you out. Other grounds could be that the tenant died. So the tenant, maybe there's a family that lived there and the tenancy's in, say for example, John Smith's name. Unfortunately, John Smith dies. There isn't a tenancy with the rest of the family. Now, they can negotiate to get one of those, but if that doesn't get resolved, then they would be able to get evicted. That doesn't sound very kind or friendly, but the landlord does need a legal contract with someone that lives there. Any illegal activity as well, no right to rent, so you couldn't say that you're allowed to stay there indefinitely. But the problem with the Section 8 is that it takes months to get this done. So this can take up to 6 months for it to go through, and that's expected to go up significantly. And that's because if you're getting rid of the Section 21, which takes out quite a lot of tenancies and just gets the property back for most landlords quite quickly, they're all jumping down now to the Section 8. The courts are going to get overloaded, and the expectation is that this could go up to 12 months by the end of that. Now, here's where this is a problem for tenants, because if you get a Section 21, you leave, you get a new property, nobody knows you had rental arrears. Maybe there's references and stuff like that. I've never been asked for a reference for an old tenant in my life. We take references on tenants, but it's things like job references and stuff like that. So no one's asking me as an old landlord, was my tenant any good? That just doesn't happen. So if you get a Section 21 and you've caused property damage, you've done any of the reasons that you could get evicted, often 99% of the time you get a clean sheet, you go somewhere else, and hopefully you sort yourself out and you'll really turn into a goods tenant. But if you take away this, now the only option is this. What's going to happen is once the Section 8 goes through, you get a county court judgment against you. Now, when you go for a new tenancy, they check if you have CCJs. So suddenly, you're not going to be able to get a new tenancy. That's going to be a problem. If you want to get a payday loan or a credit card or a car on finance, suddenly you're not going to be able to get that either. This is a problem. And so this quantity and volume of tenants that could end up with CCJs could be double or triple the amount that actually get one today. This is something that is meant to help people that rent a property, but ultimately I could see this being negative for them because they can't manage their money, they can't manage the property, they get a CCJ, and now they suddenly struggle to get a second property, meaning they end up in temporary accommodation and potentially homeless. This could be quite bad for people moving forward. What do you think about this? I guess for a landlord, it gets you to really understand who the good tenants are, because there's going to be more people out there with CCJ, so you can refuse those people and then be more likely to get a tenant that pays you and stuff like that. What do you think about this as a landlord, or what do you think about this as a tenant? I'd like to hear your comments below. Do make sure you smash like. Do grab our ebook if you haven't done already, Mortgage Secrets, how to grab the best mortgage in 2025. You can grab it in the description. You can grab it in the first comment as well. Also, check all the other content as well on the channel, including this video right here.